All right. Well, good morning. Thank you to everyone who was able to join us this Friday morning for today's webcast. Elements of an IT roadmap. Remember the Scouts motto. So, here is a quick look at today's agenda. We'll go ahead and do a brief introduction of LTA as well as today's guest, Jim McMahon. And then we'll spend a majority of the time discussing our topic today and wrap up with some Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and submit those through the chat or Q&A portals. And if we can, we'll address them in real time. Otherwise, we'll save them for that time at the end. So a little bit about LTA. We are a 100% independent business consulting firm. We help manufacturers, distributors, healthcare and other industries streamline processes, improve operations, and reduce costs while positioning them for growth. And we've been in the business for over 24 years. I'll look at some of our services, whether it's assisting with ERP selection, implementation, or providing project management, or you're looking to optimize your processes and services and want to take advantage of BPR and business execution. Our technology experts are here to help. We also offer technology advisory services such as interim CIO or CTO, as well as helping out with roadmaps, which we're going to talk about today, and IT strategy. Today, we are going to be joined by LTA Manager Jim McMahon. Jim has a vast IT experience, as you can see on the screen. From CTO to VP of IT and processes to Director of Business Development and Director of Materials. Jim's really done it all. Jim, he's competent in process improvement, data analysis, agile methodology, and more, as you can see on the screen. And with that, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Jim and welcome him. So Jim, welcome to the webcast.
Thanks, Brad. And with that introduction, I think I want to be bringing you to any new opportunity that comes up. So I appreciate that. Welcome everybody. Today I'm going to be going over the elements of an IT roadmap. And one of the things to kind of set the theme is tell you a little bit about my experiences growing up. So I joined the Scouts at an early age and had a fantastic experience. We had a great Boy Scout troop, very active. Every month we would go out and do something. So whether it's a service project or camping or what have you. As part of that, went through the whole progression of all the different ranks and earning a bunch of merit badges and so forth. And so I was thinking back to this and my path to earning an Eagle Scout and a little bit beyond that. And I learned a lot of skills as part of that, and it set me for my career and diversifying the experience that I've had and so forth. One of the things that you do is you progress and hopefully become a patrol leader. Troops are broken up into different patrols, and we would often have competitions with each other. And so you have to learn how to lead a team to challenge others in that competition, but also work together as a team. Additionally, in earning merit badges, learned a lot of specific skills, anything from archery to model trains to wilderness survival. Wilderness survival was interesting. You're put out in woods away from everybody else, and all you have is clothes on your back and a pocket knife. And from there, you camp overnight, make your own food. They made sure that we knew how to gather that separately so we weren't poisoning ourselves, but build a shelter and find our way out of the woods. So great experience, and that is really relevant to building an IT roadmap. So Brad, if you could go on to the next, there we go. Why create a roadmap? So in doing it, you really want to find your way out of the wilderness you may be in terms of systems and network or security, finding yourself at a disconnect or at odds with what the business goals are from being able to support the systems that are really needed. So one of the biggest things that you can do in creating a roadmap is you build that team, you build a consensus across a business on what the priorities are, and then also on what the expectations of spend are. So a lot of times with road mapping, you come up with different ideas, different options, different plans, all with different dollar signs attached to them. So an important part of that and working with the team is setting the expectation. Now, what the team means is you get the representation from all the different units across a business: finance, operations, sales, any piece of the company that is there. HR is often forgotten. So getting that team together is a process that takes time, but is something where if you involve everybody, get everybody's feedback, interest, what they're trying to achieve, thinking long term, you come up with a plan that will be able to be supported by IT. And it sets the tone of what is needed and what's not. So that way there's an alignment across the entire company with what the IT plan is. I'll speak more about further elements of that IT plan, but the important part here is making sure they have the entire business represented and involved to build the consensus. What happens if you don't do this is you tend to see maybe these symptoms in your organization or other places where you've worked. Systems are out of coordination, so they don't speak to each other the right way. It's really inefficient. There's a ton of systems versus having just a few to achieve the needs of the business. Sometimes in a process, or some of the main processes and supply chain that I've seen, is people have to go from one system to another in order to get one process done. So that's a red flag. If you also have an organization that has low confidence in support or IT activities, you know, hey, I put in this request, but then I don't hear from IT for X amount of weeks or months. That's another red flag. That's saying that, okay, there's some expectation that is not being supported the right way. Another one is spending keeps increasing. So every time you go into a budget activity, IT is always asking for more. And you may not be able to explain it well. Perhaps the organization is setting expectations, or there's a ton of shadow IT going on that are creating additional requirements that weren't planned for. So there's an organizational piece that is extremely important to remember. So the big thing with this is make sure that you set a path out of the wilderness. Don't just let these unfortunate expectations or problems keep occurring, but create a plan that everybody can support and get around. You can go to the next slide. And my control doesn't seem to be working. All right, thanks, Brad. Yeah. The team and the mindset is an important element that I was alluding to in the last slide. So really, back to the scouting, the scout law is one of the things that is built upon the scout motto, be prepared, and has the elements of what a scout should be. So trustworthy, loyal, and helpful are the first three. And those are real good guides to conducting an IT roadmap assessment. So you have to be very honest. So the trustworthy part of it is really having that honest approach. Be brutally honest with your assessment of systems. Make sure that as an IT organization that you don't have some of the more, I don't know, pet projects that you want, the personal interests involved in some of the customizations or things that have been learned. Don't have those as a guide. They're good to have, but the question is, are these really aligned to what the company needs? Is it something where it makes more sense to have an off-the-shelf system with very little customization versus a highly customized system, which what's going to happen with that from a support and expansion 3 years from now? So is it going to be able to be kept relevant? There are arguments for both sides, and I'll explain that in some of the real life examples examples of both of those cases. So be very honest that way. Loyal to the company goals as well. And what are the projects the company needs over what IT wants? So maybe a different network, going to the cloud, or different desires. Maybe Azure is being perceived as the cloud, or AWS or Google. There's other options to that, and still be on the cloud. That may be a less burdensome expense for your company. And definitely don't go there too fast, or else you'll find yourself spending more than what was expected. The helpful is building that consensus. So really, I can't stress enough of getting the right team from across the company to be involved. So these are sometimes conflicting organizations, but in the end, keep it very helpful, keep it very focused on the goal of getting everybody's needs and wants. But in the end, it may be something where it's less than what the full desire is. Everybody wants the Bentley or the Rolls Royce, but maybe that's not right for the company. So that can get vetted out in these conversations and building the IT roadmap as a team. Another thing with being brutally honest is looking at the organization and seeing if you have the skill set. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide. So the friendly, courteous, and kind part of the Scout Law is very focused on the customer. That's how that one would translate to me. So the customer is the one who where revenue comes from, right? So we need to make sure that we're not only aligned to the business, but what are customers looking for? What are customers starting to talk about being interested in? Are those the right directions that the industry is going in? Or maybe another industry that can say, hey, if we brought this over, we would have a competitive advantage over for our customers, and getting them more involved in our business, more linked to our business than our competition does. So that's a big element of designing IT systems more and more. It's beyond just mobile apps and so forth, but it's how to make it easy for the customer to do business with you, and how to make it easy for the customer to be competitive in their field. So it could be individuals that you do business with, and so what makes it easy for them? It could be different businesses that you support as a supplier, and how do you make it so that they have a competitive advantage over their customers, but also focus your IT efforts and goals on supporting those competitive advantages, so it makes it easy for customers to do business with you. Efficiency gains are another big focus area. So in looking at the IT roadmap, a lot of times work on step improvements. So a sprint at a time, if you're an agile shop, or having projects which focus on a specific efficiency gain. Part of the road mapping is to take that and spread it out over a longer time frame. What are the things that would really transform the business? What are those huge efficiency gains? Maybe automation, applying IoT to the manufacturing floor, which is going to take a long time to do, but what are the expected yields from that in the end? And is it something that you could automate quality, so you reduce rework, reduce inspection times by having inspection built into the processes, having that huge data pool that machines are incorporating today in order to get that machine learning to apply, so you have not only time efficiency, but also quality efficiency. So it's that looking to the future. There's a lot of relevance, a lot of learning that needs to go on from a year-to-year basis to keep relevant to the new trends in the market. There's a lot of changes that have happened over the last year, last 3 years, last 5 years, with enabling big data, platform changes, the evolution of .NET technology, cloud-based systems. I mean, the list just goes on and on. VR applications for training, especially. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot of learning that needs to be done, and this is something that we do at LTA regularly, so we can help you with as well. So put in that little plug. But really back to the goal of this, the element of the IT roadmap is to be customer focused. From there, developing the roadmap, you need to deliver on the goals. So complete the plan. So having a plan is great, but you also need to manage to that plan. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. So organizationally, the processes, systems, and platforms are all very important that we've talked about. So, the big data, the, potentially cloud, off the shelf versus customization, what have you. But really what it comes down to in the end is your organization. So I've worked with companies where there wasn't a lot of investment in growth. There wasn't enough investment in some of the project management skills and leadership. So really the IT organization needs to be part of the roadmap assessment. So there's a lot of things that people want to do, systems to put in, but do you have the right skill sets to be able to handle that? Does the IT organization have the necessary skills as part of it, not only for the present, but for the future? So this could be one of those gaps in the support expectations, but beyond support, it's further development. There's a few ways to handle that. The way that is good for the long term is find out a way to train and grow people that are within the organization. So if you have a large enough company, a large enough IT need, having that internal, there always needs to be a plan for keeping development resources relevant to the changes in the IT industry. So switching from the traditional ASP that .NET started with basically to Angular or one of the other coding platforms that are present today. And then you need to build the right team. So you need to make sure that you have the right culture, the right personalities, but then also the right knowledge from, if you're going to do Agile, which I highly recommend, that you have the right people who understand that methodology and what is involved with it, and then how to project manage in an Agile shop over the long term to make sure that the goals are being met. However, in some cases, external might be the right answer. So there's a lot of shops out there that do the personnel management, make sure that their resources are kept relevant. So there's a long search process that needs to be done, long being a few months to find the right partners for what you want to do. It's not easy to just go onto the web, look for this. There's a big interview process, making sure that they have the right skill sets, the billing rate is relevant and competitive, but also how do they manage that so you don't have another source where spend is always increasing. So there's a big evaluation that needs to be done with the support companies. Additionally, for speaking of support, is having a managed service provider involved. Do you want to manage your own network with all the additional security concerns that are out there? Very relevant with ransomware. In fact, we're working with one client who has been infected, and we had to rebuild a network with this client who got hit by ransomware right when we started talking with them. So with cases like that, security needs to be a huge element of your roadmap. So keep it clean, be brave to make the organizational decisions, but also be reverent. I mean, think about long-term and the people growth, be loyal to your people as well, of course. So from there, okay, got a plan. Went through the whole consensus, the organization, the tools, the network, security, etc. So now there's a plan that everybody is behind, hopefully. So budgeted for it. Now, in order to keep to the plan, you need to make sure that every sprint, there's resources allocated to it. Sometimes this may be just allocating a portion of the points to building those foundational changes that need to happen within the IT organization for those longer term items. So as part of the plan, make sure there's elements of planning and reserve in the near term be able to support the longer term objectives. So that's part of one of the roadmap elements that we always provide is how do you get from the current situation to where you want to go? Hence the roadmap. Keep measuring against this plan and communicate that often. So keep people, as priorities change in the business, as customers' expectations change, you need to make sure that you keep that allocation intact, or else you won't be able to build those foundations that enable those longer term goals. For instance, with big data, it takes a long time to put that in place, right? And building a data lake, having the master data management, making sure that you have the different definitions of fields across systems understood, those foundational elements take resources and time, but what that enables in the end are those big transformational changes of applying machine learning with all these different systems involved in talking together in a data warehouse and data lake they can pull against. So doing that keeps you earning those merit badges. You learn those different things as you're building those foundational elements, and as you're doing that, those transformational changes start to take shape. The other piece is revisiting that plan periodically. So a roadmap developed 3 years ago may look very different than one developed or updated today. So in order to keep relevant, keep the IT resources applied the right way for the company, make sure that there's a periodic revisiting of the plan. It's not to redo the entire thing, but it's to update it with changes. So I would recommend every 6 months to a year, make sure that this effort is done in a smaller form, but bring the team back together, make sure that you go through it, say that, okay, here's what we set out to accomplish, here's what we have accomplished so far to that plan, but then are these the same objectives going forward? Do we have any changes financially, customer base wise, direction of the company wise that really impact these? So that way you keep relevant to not only your company's direction, but with the customers. The other side of this is make sure that it's 6 months, a year, not every month. If you're changing every month, then there's not really a plan. You've just an IT organization and making system changes and being able to support those can't really change that fast. There's elements that perhaps can, if you have a good flexible foundation, which is great, but those are specific areas of flexibility, not total platform changes. So with this is be prepared. You have the plan, but you keep revisiting that plan to make sure that you're always prepared. All right, so I'll go through a couple real world examples to show how we've applied these before, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. So first one was a warehouse and logistics company. So working with them, going through the goals, I identified that they really wanted to expand the business, but we're having trouble doing so. They had a very small customer base, is very specific, and they're having trouble getting out of that couple of big customers and smaller other customers. They really wanted to expand the business, was one of the goals. With this, it was a smaller company targeted at specific industries. So that helped focus the plan rather than trying to be the end all for everybody. So having that focus on specific industries really refined the goals quite a bit. So with that alignment to the company goals and then working with some of their customers and understanding their customer needs, the big question came up of whether to customize an application to handle the warehouse management parts of it, the order management and delivery methodology involved versus configuring an off-the-shelf tool. So in working with some of the prospective customers and existing customers, they were looking to have multiple systems brought together. So each of these customers were big enough that they had multiple systems themselves who they didn't have any way to tie information between internally to have a cohesive and comprehensive order management system from their warehousing needs. They had multiple suppliers involved, so different timelines associated with different pieces of equipment delivery. So they needed some help with tying everything together. So it was determined that the competitive advantage and the methodology was enough to build a .NET application in-house. There were already some elements present there, but to really expand that over a 2-year plan. So minimum platform was decided upon. What are the different features of that? What are the resources involved? Were all the organizational changes that were made internally and then also externally. So they hired a development house and had very minimal internal resources from an IT standpoint. And this plan was achieved by keeping to that minimum viable product launched and then refinements after that. The big element was to make it very flexible for interfacing with other systems, which was achieved, but also to make sure that it was very specific to the industry, spoke the language of the industry, displayed things the way that the industry wanted to see them, and provide flexible reporting back. So as that case happened with the IT roadmap, 2-year plan with a longer term plan after that, they kept to it, they allocated resources and budget to it, and in the end, the business did grow rapidly. They expanded over the course of 5 years, approximately 5-fold in terms of both customers and locations involved. So very, very successful with what they achieved there. The second case is very different. So a healthcare company who had the red flag of nobody had confidence in IT. So they had aging systems. They had their own network in-house versus the last example was actually already cloud-based on a data center. So they weren't on any of the big names. They were just on a data center and stayed there, but had a managed service partner involved to manage the network. That worked well for them. The healthcare company tried to do all of that in-house, but they had a very small IT team. There were only 6 people on the IT team, and hence the network was aging. Their skill set was also not kept relevant, so it was not a very good network at all. The last thing that it was not scalable. So this company was also looking to expand quite a bit. It was a growth-oriented company, but they weren't able to plan out their scalability because the systems were a limitation. So in doing the assessment of, okay, why is there no confidence in IT? What are the different options from aging systems and network standpoint? What is the budget involved with being able to get ready for scalability? We ended up revamping on the roadmap, going through a few different elements. One is we looked at in-house versus out of the company for the different skill sets that were needed. A couple were brought in, one of the knowledge bases, so for their customer applications and reporting is a huge need at this company. So we brought those skill sets in-house. The network and support, we went with a data center and then also a managed service provider as part of the roadmap. As part of that, some of the resources were shifted over to the managed service provider in order to keep continuity, but also as loyalty to those employees. They had good skill sets. It was just not something that was aligned to the company growth requirements, but is something that kept the continuity with the company. In this one, in order to be scalable, the decision was made to get away from the customizations. They weren't a big enough competitive advantage for the customers. And in this case, customers were more individual based. So the customizations were very limited to what made it more efficient within the company versus looking efficient or transformational for customers. In that way, off-the-shelf systems were used, customizations were reduced, and ended up being a much more supportable platform. With the MSP, the supportability increased so that people would get immediate responses for tickets, but also very quick mean time to resolution as being one of the drivers behind improving that support performance. The organizational changes were very transformational. The end result was a very different looking IT organization that was actually smaller. So reduce the size internally, but increase the size externally. There was an increase in budget in order to get to that scalability, but it aligned with the revenue. So there was a timeline associated. So it wasn't an immediate burden, but it was something that was planned for and also supported. During the evaluations of the data center and MSP, cost was a big element to make sure it was long-term sustainable with regards to revenue, and having those staff changes and keeping relevant, the service level was able to actually get better, not only just maintain, but get better over time, as well as the functionality and performance of the system. So again, another success story. With planning out over multiple years and having the patience, but also methodology to keep to those plans and keep the plans relevant and up to date are what made those two cases very successful. All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jim. So I know we are at the 11:30 mark. So those of you who do need to jump off, we definitely understand, but we want to stick around for a couple minutes just to answer a couple of the questions that came through. And if anyone else has any other questions, by all means, type those in now and we'll address them. So Jim, the first one we had here is, how does your roadmap account for new technology, especially since the pace of new technology continues to increase?
That's part of the revisiting. That's a great question. So on this one, it's attending webinars. LinkedIn has a bunch of webinars that are very relevant to this subject. There's industry publications where you can learn about how other companies are applying information technology changes and increases to get you an idea of how to apply those to a roadmap. But that's also the plan of coming back in and how to grow the organization. So sending people, reserving some time and budget for keeping relevant is vital to a good roadmap, and making sure that the company supports that financially. There are some conferences which are good. Not all of them are really great with it, but some that are good with learning different industry trends. I found that being in supply chain, Apex kept relevant for a number of years, but specifically to the industry that was in, which was mostly high tech and telecom, they were a little bit behind the times often. So you do need to have multiple sources of education and a budget and plan associated with that. Something that we do, and I'll put that little plug in there as well, but we can help with that as well.
Great. Next question I have here is, you suggested revisiting every 6 or 12 months. How do you suggest we address new staff that are being brought on during that time? I guess like bringing them in, it sounds like.
Yep. So with this, I would say as part of the onboarding, there needs to be a plan with the company vision, the company goals, but then the IT vision and goals and roadmap. I think that's an important element for the entire IT organization to understand as part of onboarding. With bringing in people who have different experiences and so forth, they can make a huge positive impact on feeding back to that roadmap in those 6 to 12 month revisits. So, but as part of that, it needs to be reasoned out. Cost-wise, what is this going to cost? What is this going to enable and benefit? What's the ROI for making changes that are being proposed there? But yeah, it's definitely part of onboarding is making sure that everybody has a clear vision and goals that are being sought after.
Great. If anyone else has questions, please go ahead and submit them now. The last one I have here is that you mentioned people will make it work. This is our biggest hurdle. We've had a handful of senior IT staff who are against a new system, period. Do you have any suggestions on how to keep their skill set and knowledge while pushing our needle forward?
Wow, that is a tough situation, especially when it's leadership. It's what I can suggest is show pros and cons of sticking with the current systems versus introducing a new system. This becomes a budgetary thing over time, and relevance, efficiency, supportability. I've been with companies where we were using systems that were long out of support. So that's why I kind of laugh, because I can totally relate to this situation. Having it is really with any kind of change proposal, it's what are the benefits versus the costs, and not just now, but over time. It's a very difficult conversation to have, but it's something that if you can at all work a pilot episode with potential other platforms where they get some of your data, example data, of course, but then run a demonstration of how things can work better, then that is the way to do it. If you have customizations as part of your existing platform, that's what's behind the resistance to move, is to show what has changed industry-wide or platform-wide, going with some other package that would reduce those customizations. And then that reduction would reduce the support needs, the number of tickets that come in when those customizations are having problems, when other systems that are interfaces exist with get updated, what that causes from a customization standpoint. It's what's going to happen further over time in those situations is going to be more and more expensive to get out of those situations. And they're going to stop working as the operating systems go out of support as well. So that needs to be baked into, okay, in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, this is the cost that we would be up against if we have to get off of this platform.
Great. We did not have any other questions come in, but if anyone thinks of a question later today or over the weekend, please don't hesitate to reach out. Myself and Jim's emails are on the screen here, and we'd be happy to help answer any questions and talk about how LTA can help. So with that, enjoy the rest of your Friday. And Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I enjoyed this. And just to echo what Brad was saying, yeah, please feel free to reach out. We would be glad to help.